Hey, good evening. Okay, good evening, everybody. Um, I will tell you up front, I have a cold. It's not a man cold, so if I sneeze, sorry in advance. Um, and I'm not looking for remedies. Don't worry, got plenty of remedies here. Baruch Hashem. Let me just move this over, make this actually smaller. Just a second. Hmm, let's see. Just give me a second to get myself set up here. I don't know why this is. There we go. Okay, we're going to do tonight is the first five psukim of Parak Gimel, the third chapter of Mishle. The reason we're going to do five is that there's really a lot here tonight. If you take a look at this slide, if you have your book in front of you, that's great. If not, just watch and look along the slide, and you'll see the first five psukim. I'll read them in English. In Hebrew, I'll translate them, whatever it says here in English, and we'll start getting into it. The truth of the matter is that these five psukim I could spend the next 3 months on, but I'm not. I'm going to spend just tonight because it gets boring. You spend too much time on one thing. There's a yeshiva Chavetz Chaim. The Chavetz Chaim, the joke is, they say, is what daf of Gemara you learned this year. Usually say what Masechta, what volume of Gemara. There they ask what page, because they drill down and down and down and down and down and down until they've exhausted everything that's ever been written. And that's not my method. Anyways, so let's just read the first five psukim, translate, and then we'll start talking about it's all going on here. V'ni Torati al tishkach. My son, do not forget my teaching. In this case, Torah does not mean Torah. It means teaching. The horot we've seen already means to teach. Don't forget my Torah, my teachings. Umitzvotai yitzor libecha. But let your mind retain my commandments, to remember my commandments. Bet, ki orech yamim ushnot chayim v'shalom yosifu lach. Why? Why remember the mitzvot? Why commit things to memory? Why not to forget the teachings? Because what will it do? It will give you a length of days, years of life will be added to you, which if you're just on a cursory level, this should be raising red flags and questions, obviously, which we'll see. Chesed ve'emet al ya'azvucha. Let chesed, kindness, I'm not going to translate chesed, and emet, truth, don't let them leave you. What are you supposed to do with them? Koshreim al gagrotecha. You should bind them, literally means tie them to your throat. Kotvei maluach libecha, and write them on the tablet of your heart. It's a nice metaphor. We'll have to see what it means. And by doing that, you will find favor in the eyes of Hashem and in human beings, in man. Trust in Hashem with your whole heart. For your own understanding, your knowledge, your wisdom, don't rely on that, or only on that. Okay, so quite a few things that we need to talk about in these few psukim. The very first pasuk, again, at the risk of sounding repetitive, Shlomo HaMelech is using the word bini, my son, because we're talking about a relationship here. We're talking about before there was the personification of chokhmah, of wisdom, and and now Shlomo HaMelech talks to us from the perspective of a father, meaning Hashem, to us, and saying, my son, don't do this and do this. Vilna Gaon says that we're talking, the perspective is a father training a son, a child who's maturing. Now, why I say a child, even though I use the word ben, everything I say tonight, with very little exception, applies to females and males. The language of the Tanakh is talking to the male, with very little exception. And the reason, it's not just a nice, oh, look, Hashem is talking to us like father to son. That's nice. But it's more than that, that you have to feed. It doesn't say banai, my children. It says bini, my son. Is Hashem is personally addressing each one of us. And when we read these kind of words, or this word in particular, we should feel that Shlomo Melech is saying Hashem is talking directly to us. And Torati, as I said, does not mean Torah. It means instruction, life guidance. Shlomo Melech is telling us that we should not forget these things. We shouldn't forget it. Now, forgetting is passive, right? What does it mean forgetting is passive? Let's say, for example, when I was in my senior year in college, I took a class in operations, research, and management. It was the class I put off to the very, very last quarter of the very last year of college because I didn't want to take it, and I had to for my major. And it was heavy math, and it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was taught by some man from Turkey who had a heavy accent. Turns out I aced it. I was great. Now I did. I don't know how I did it, but I did great. If you were to give me, and I've seen the textbook since then. That was in 1980, I think. I open it up, and it 100% looks Chinese with Japanese footnotes. It means absolutely nothing to me. Why? Once the course was over and I did well and finished my major and I got my degree, I couldn't care less because I didn't personally feel I needed it for anything else in my life. Did I say, okay, now we have to take that out of my head? I don't want to know it. No, of course not. It's passive. It happens. It happens because no one chooses to forget. Yeah, and I know I'm not going to sidetrack into Zechor al Tishkach. Remember, don't forget when it comes to Amalek. But human nature tends towards what we call in English entropy. Okay, things fall by the wayside unless the expression use it or lose it. The Rambam tells us in the Talmud Torah that forgetting Torah is inevitable unless you review. This pasuk seems to also give us a psychological perspective. Wisdom disappears without vigilance. Remember, we're not just talking the word Torah, meaning Torah the Tanakh. We're talking about instruction. And what is instruction? Until now, especially in the second chapter, it referred to Chokhmah, wisdom, which was the big buildup in the last chapter. So even that wisdom without vigilance, and the vigilance on reviewing, vigilance on not giving into temptations that we've seen in chapter 2, will disappear without that. And then he says, it's again, the first pasuk, umitzvotai yitzar libecha, that you should guard your heart, my mitzvot in your heart. What does that mean here? Now, the heart, there are different approaches as to what the heart represents. We're going to go with the expression that, in this case, it's not about emotion, but rather it's about the seat of making decisions. The Malbim gives us an interesting perspective. He says there's a very specific distinction to be made between Torah and mitzvot. Torah must not be forgotten. It's a cognitive act. Mitzvot have to be guarded. It's a moral act. So what does that mean? We have to, the Torah and the Torot, the instruction has to be cognitively pursued, that we have to make sure we stay after it and we review. Someone asked me a very simple question recently having to do with Hanukkah. I haven't started looking over the Hanukkah halachot. A very basic question. Barach li min harosh. It kind of went out of my head. I didn't remember. I had to look it up, which is fine. That's fine. It's not a problem. And even when people ask me a question and I know the answer, I still like to look it up because it's always good to review. But that's one thing we have to proactively. You can't say that what I learned in my year in seminary, my year in yeshiva, my year I spent intensively studying something, or in 8th grade, whatever, or in 12th grade, that's enough. It's never enough. You're plateauing, and now you're plateauing, you're going backwards. So that's the Torah. They proactively trying to recall it, to work with it. And the mitzvot have to be guarded. You have to guard the mitzvot. What does that mean, though? It means you have to set yourself certain things that help you to do things proactively with mitzvot. For example, create certain habits. Let's say for routines. Let's say, for example, you decided that, going to one shiur a week is not enough. Going to 2 shiurim or listening online, something like this, is not sufficient. You decide, you know what? I want to start going through Mishle. I want to start learning Parshat Shavua. I want whatever it might be. Always, by the way, start small. Never start with, I'm going to learn Kol HaTorah. Cool, all the Torah. You're already done. But it means setting a routine. It could mean that when you come home from shul, you sit down in the morning. If you go to shul, you come home before you even eat breakfast, and that's your first 15, 20 minutes is Torah. It could mean a person's very tired in the morning. They want to do it at night. They want to do it in the afternoon. Set a routine so that by the time you've gone through a certain amount of time, it becomes second nature. and I'll prove it to you. When we change over from Tein Brachat to Tein Talumatar, or we change over from Oridatal to Mashiva Ruach, when we do those kind of changeovers, we say, the halacha is that if during those first 30 days, you're not 100% sure if you said the right thing or not, then certain rules kick in. What's the 30 days? Because the assumption is by the time you've gone through it for 90 times approximately, it's actually a bit less than 30 days, that now becomes part of you, becomes part of your quote routine. And so once you do something, it might be very difficult. I've never done, reviewed Parshat Shavua my whole life. I never sat down and did what's called Shnai Mikra Targum. Read each pasuk twice, and you read the Targum Onkelos or Hebrew or English or Rashi on the pasuk. I want to start. Okay, so maybe you do it once, maybe twice. Okay, this next aliyah is too long. Forget it. I'll catch up next week. You have to get into a routine. You have to set boundaries for yourself as well, and some kind of a deliberate structure that you. I just moved the screen.
Third day of diarrhea again. I had 3 days of it last week again.
Okay, just a minute here. Hold on.
I had 3 days of it last.
I don't know what's going on here. Just 1 second, please. Let me go back here. I'm going to make this big. I'm going to do one more thing here. Mute all. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So anyways, so we're talking about setting routines and habits. Shlomo begins the chapter, Shlomo HaMelech begins the chapter by framing wisdom as a battle against forgetting, a battle against complacency, a battle against moral drift. So what he's doing in the introductory pasuk here is really preparing us, not just with inspiration, but also discipline. A lot of Mishle, I can't say a lot, a percentage of Mishle is about discipline. Very similar to Pirkei Avot. I don't know if a sefer like this exists, but I would imagine it does. And if it doesn't, it should be written to write a comparison between Pirkei Avot teachings and Mishle teachings. And you'll find, I'm sure, a lot of crossover. In any case, the second pasuk, just to reread, said, that by doing this, what it says in pasuk Aleph, in the first pasuk, then it will give you length of days, years of life, and well-being. Shalom. Okay. So this should, as I say, raise a couple of questions. It sounds like a reward, right? You keep my mitzvot, guard them, you go into routines, make sure you do that. You try to review your learning and your wisdom, and you make sure you don't forget. And then, because of that, you earn this longer life and everything else. But most of the commentaries say it's really a description of a consequence, meaning because you did it, not as a reward, but because you have invested in mental exercise and the time and going through the Torah and going through these things to set yourself up for not failure, but the exact opposite, for success, the result is longer days and longer life. But again, there's something not right here. Why is there something not right? Because Orech Yamim can mean longer days, but listen to what a couple of the commentaries say. Listen to Radak. Radak tells us that it means days that will feel long. What does that mean? Not what you're thinking, oh my God, I'm so bored, the day never ends. Exactly the opposite. It's a day that is not, it's a life that is not consumed by stress and inner turmoil, which makes the all kinds of problems. It means a sense of inner peace, that the day will feel fulfilled. And the Vilna Gaon also tells us that a person who uses their time wisely will see that each day as enriched. Now, I'm going to take a couple of examples. One example, actually, for the first part of this pasuk, and we're going to come back to the next one of Shnot Chaim in a moment. Let's take a look at this slide here. Okay. It's possible you never paid attention to this pasuk. It's the very beginning of Parshat Miketz. We're going to come to it in a couple of weeks. It says, Vayi Miketz Shnatayim Yamim was at the end of 2 years. Ufaro Cholem, and Paro dreamed or dreamt. He was standing by the edge of the river. If you read this fast or you don't pay attention, you're going to miss something critical. Oops, I highlighted too much. This is what I want to highlight. Shnatayim yamin. There seems to be an extra word here. Shnatayim means in Hebrew 2 years. Yamim means days. So really the Torah could have said, Shnatayim, it was after 2 years. This is 2 years that Yosef is in the pit after he did what he did. And Paro dreamt. What does it mean when it says that Paro, this story at the beginning of Miketz takes place 2 years of days later? Because when it comes to someone like Paro, when it comes to someone who not only is not a Torah observant Jew, but is the antithesis and is an enemy, every day is just a day. It's just 2 years of days. Nothing accomplished, nothing that's cumulative, nothing that has been like a hitztabut of a gathering, an increase of more knowledge and more growth and more Torah and more, whatever it might be. It was just 2 years of days. Now, in Kvar, we're talking about Paro. Let's talk a little first 1 second about another psukim, one from that parasha, one from this week's parasha, that is also something interesting. After Paro has his first dream about the cows and all, it says, Vayikatz Paro v'hinei chalom. Paro woke up, and it was a dream. Let me make this bigger because this is way too small. Oops. Hold on a second. Still not big enough. Okay. In our parasha, the beginning of the parasha is the famous story where Yaakov Avinu goes to sleep with his head on a rock made up of many rocks. And he dreams about the ladder, the sulam, Mutzav Arza, and Roshom Magia Shemaim. It's solid on the ground. The top goes up to the heavens. The malachim, the angels are going up and down. And what happens? Vayikatz Yaakov Mishenato. By the way, this word here, forget everything else for a moment. Mishenato. If you say Mishnato, it's wrong. Mishenato means from his sleep. Mishnato means his learning. Vayikatz Yaakov Mishenato. Yaakov woke up from his sleep. Vayomer, and he said, Achen yesh Hashem hamakom hazeh, v'anochi lo yadati. God is in this place, and I wasn't even cognizant of it. What happens? What's the difference between these two? Paro wakes up. It's a dream. Doesn't mean anything. It's useless. It's just another dream. Yaakov understands that there was hitgalut. It was a revelation of God. This is one of the other differences between us and other people in the world, let's say, when it comes to recognition in every phase of our lives, including in our sleep, the presence of Hashem in our lives. So let's go back to this pasuk here. And let's talk about this other part of it where it says Shenot Chaim. It's an unusual phrase. The pasuk already said Orech Yamim. It already said length of days, which we said either length of days or the days that will feel long, or that you use your time wisely and be richer. What is Shenot Chaim? the years of life. So that David tells us, and I have it, I'll just read to you, don't have it in front of you. Ratzalo Mari means to say, Shalom Hashket V'Shalva. It means the idea of being at peace. Being at peace. Rabbeinu Yonah tells us it's a spiritual meaning. That it means that your life will grow rather than stagnate. There's nothing worse than plateauing. So fine, you're not going to forget your information. You're not going to forget your wisdom. You're going to learn Torah. But what's the benefit besides having it still? It means that you're in an upward motion. You're mobile here in your mind. And that's so important. And what's the Vishalom? What's Shalom? Shalom is not only the absence of conflict, it also means the inner quiet, peace. So what Shlomo is telling us in this one pasuk, among many other possibilities. Number one, Torah shapes the quality of our life. Number two, it's not just the duration. It's for not like when you're learning. It has a long-term effect. A person who lives by Torah is not promised endless years. Doesn't mean you're going to live an extra 150 years, but a life that's deeply lived, as opposed to Paro, who had a Paro of 2 years and of days. Here, each day will feel a sense of accomplishment and fulfilled. I can guarantee you that all of you listening right now, have had days where by the end of the day, you say, what did I do today? I was busy, busy, busy. I didn't do anything. And some days, like, wow, that was really an accomplishing day. I got so much done today. And that's normal. That's natural. And what Shlomo Melech is telling us in this pasuk is that you'll have more of those, wow, I really accomplished so much and I feel fulfilled. And the day itself feels good when you make sure you follow pasuk aleph, which is, of course, to guard the Torah, guard the teachings, and to make sure you properly practice the mitzvot. Next pasuk again. Let's read it. Gimel. Chesed ve'emet al ya'azvucha. Koshrei mal gargerotecha, kotvei mal luach libecha. Here it says, let fidelity and steadfastness. Okay, whatever. Wonderful English. Chesed and truth, you should not leave you. Bind them to your throat and write them on the tablet of your heart. Here it says mind, but it literally means heart. Again, we have to understand here. Chesed, kindness, could say flexibility, warmth, how we treat other people. And the met, which is justice and truth, boundaries, are often in conflict. Shlomo HaMelech is telling us in this pasuk, never let chesed overpower emet, and never let emet overpower chesed. Because wisdom, chokhmah, remember this is all about chokhmah, and that's like the general title here, is the skill of blending wisdom is blending chesed and emet. Let's take a look at another slide here. And it's an amazing statement the Gemara makes. There's a whole list of reasons the Gemara gives as to why the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, the second Beit HaMikdash. This one might refer to the first. I don't remember. I think it's the second one. It's Lo Chava Yerushalayim Ela Al. It's the phrase that's used multiple times. The only reason that Yerushalayim was destroyed was because of, so it could be Sinat Chinam, it could be that the first Beit HaMikdash that they were sinning on the three great big sins. But this one's kind of shocking. It says, Lo Chavar Yerushalayim Ela Al Shehemidu Dinehem Al Din Torah, that the reason the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed is that the judges and the Chachamim, the wise people, would be steadfast and mamash letter of the law, black and white, the law of du lifnim mishurat hadin, and they didn't work. Lifnim mishurat hadin means beyond the letter of the law. It means literally in the letter of the law or the rules. But what does this mean? What does it mean that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed? Because aren't you supposed to keep the Torah mitzvot? I mean, keep the Torah and make decisions based on the Torah? So what was happening was that they were doing only emet. What does that mean? They were living only by emet, means that it says this in the Torah. That was exactly what had to happen. That was the rule in the case, with no wiggle room for taking certain things into consideration, mitigating circumstances, whatever it might have been. I'm not getting into details right now, but it's telling us ad kedei kach, to such an extent that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, according to one opinion, because instead of having chesed and emet living together, there was emet was overruling everything, and chesed was going by the wayside. It says chesed olam yibaneh, that the world is built on chesed, and because the world is built on chesed, when you take that away, it'll crumble. The Beit HaMikdash was the physical manifestation of Hashem in this world, not of Hashem, but as a home, quote unquote, for Hashem in this world. destroyed that, and by doing only emet and not chesed. And again, the other extreme is also not good. Chesed only, right? Sometimes you have to set boundaries for yourself. You know, a person who spends, and again, I've told the story before, I'm not going to tell it now, about someone I knew only after he passed away, who was known to literally give away his money, give away his coat in the winter to people, because that's who he was. And when he got paid, the organization he worked for had to give the money to the wife, because they knew that as soon as the husband got it, he was giving it to tzedakah, and it's just a tremendous Baal Chesed. But again, yesh gvul. You can't put yourself into a situation where you are in need of money. So in those cases, it says that let's go back to the pasuk. again, just to look at it again. Chesed v'emet al ya'azvucha. You should not, they should not leave you. Okay, what does that mean? They shouldn't leave you. There's a commentary on the Navi called Mari Kara. Sometimes life circumstances, and this is what he says, cause us or push us to abandon certain values. When truth becomes uncomfortable, we rationalize. What does that mean? Someone might say that, you know, business is business. And if I got to cut corners a little bit here and there, it's okay. I don't need to be so perfect in business. I'm not so perfect in this. I can be not so perfect in that too. And we rationalize it. The guy's got millions. Example I gave in the Pierre Cavall class the other day. The idea of you come home from the store, you go to the store and they give you too much change. You know, I guess they say stick it to the man. No, it's stealing, outright stealing. You can't say, oh, they have, Rami Levy has hundreds of millions of shekel. What do they need? What do they care about the 20 extra shekel they gave me? No, the 20 extra shekel is not yours. That's called stealing. So when truth becomes uncomfortable, the admit of the situation, we tend to rationalize. When kindness is inconvenient, when it's not easy for us to do a chesed, I don't need to do this because I'm lazy or someone else will do it. But we withdraw. So the pasuk is telling us to fight to retain both. Again, not at the expense of our shalom bayit, which is not good. Because when you are out there all the time doing chesed and chesed and chesed and chesed, and your own home is suffering, it's a very big problem. But where are you supposed to? What are you supposed to do? There's two physical places. Shlomo HaMelech tells us to attach these values, chesed and emet, to us. Where he says, "Koshrem al gargarotecha," you should tie them to your throat, to your neck. Kotvem al luach libecha, and write them on the luach, the tablet of your heart. What's the difference between them? So before I answer that, let's go back a step to a different topic, and maybe we'll see an insight here. And the Torah gives us, for those of you who joined late, I have a cold. That's why I'm with all how I sound. Sorry. When the Torah gives us instruction as to how to identify an animal, if it's kosher or not, so it gives us the instruction of it has to, for an animal, chew its cud, and also it has to have split hooves. Now, Hashem can do anything, right? Hashem can do anything. With that understanding, why not just have one? Say, if it has split hooves, boom, you're done. And all animals that are kosher would have split hooves, and all the animals that weren't kosher would not have them. End of story. Why did Hashem have to do it? That there are two simanim, two signs. So if you realize, you think about it, if you haven't, one is external and one is internal. The split hooves are external. You can physically see that they are split hooves. The chewing the cud is internal. It happens within the stomach. You can see that then chewing and chewing and chewing, but tachlis, it's in the inside. Why? Because it's a message to us that if you want to be kosher, if you want to be a good, proper, fit Jew and do what's right, you're kosher on the outside and you're kosher on the inside. Now, having said that, let's look again at these two expressions. To tie them to your neck. The neck is visible. It's here. It's outside. That's your public behavior. Internalize them. It's inside. The heart is inside. You need to feel, not that you're, on performance. You need to feel. It's not external. It's external and internal, which is why Shlomo HaMelech says that these two items, the emet and chesed, should be visible and internalized to you. Rav Hirsch tells us also that a Torah person exhibits chesed and emet naturally, not as a strategy, but as their character. That's just the person that they are. You look at somebody who exudes chesed and emet, and you hope and pray that that's external and internal. And Baruch Hashem, most people are not fakers. And it's funny, when I learned this pasuk, the koshrei malgar gerotecha, the first thing I pictured, shows you where my brain is Olympic winners of Olympics, where they're standing on the blocks and they're getting their medal, getting the Nobel Prize. They get the medal on the outside, getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom, whatever. Just every country, the Silver Cross, use that, whatever it might be, and they hang it around the neck, right? Because it's visible, it's out there. Doesn't mean everyone who gets it is inside the good person who necessarily deserves it, because being a good jujitsu player doesn't or taekwondo, which Baruch Hashem is doing well, doesn't mean it has nothing to do with being a good person or not good, being a good person per se. We're not talking about that. We're talking about chesed and emet. Let's look at the next pasuk again. Dalet. Umtzachen v'sechel tov b'nei Elohim v'adam. And you will, when you do this, when you watch my teachings and not forget them, when you not just keep my commandments, but you retain them, you remember them, you do them, it will give it. It does whatever it does to your days in your life, which we discussed. When you are taking chesed and you're taking emet, and you allow them not to leave you, and you're doing them both your out external and internal, all that, then you will find favor in the eyes of Hashem and in the eyes of man. Okay, so what happens here? The quintessential matzachen, of course, is Noach. Noach matzachen b'nei Hashem. Noach found favor in the eyes of Hashem. What is chen? The chen shel Torah. The beauty, the grace is probably the best word to use to translate it into English. It also has another meaning, which we've talked about in Tefillah class a long time ago. We talked about Birkat Hamazon, that chen is about giving freely with no strings attached. That Hashem gives and gives and gives. Chen is not about popularity. Doesn't mean, wow, he's really popular. It's about dignity. It's about pleasantness. It's about a moral balance. And what is sechel tov? Literally, it means good insight, common sense. The Malbim identifies it as correct judgment, intuitiveness, what to do in a complex situation. And then there are two winners, I guess. I don't know what the right word will be. Shlomo insists that true integrity, you win favor both with Hashem and with human beings, not through flattery, not because of maneuvering, not because you try to make yourself out to be what you think you should be, but true chen, a charming personality, a giving personality, one who literally lives with chesed and emet tied up together, and you become someone who can instinctively trust. Now, how does that get accomplished? How do we do that? All these things that I've just been mentioning. So there's one caveat, and that's as follows, and this is where we're going to spend some time. Betachel Hashem b'chol libecha. Trust in Hashem with all of your heart. Ve'el binatcha al tisha'en. Literally means do not rely on your own understanding. Well, wait a minute. I have to rely on my understanding. I have to, if I'm about to make a bracha, I say, wait, did I make the bracha? Did I not? I have to rely on my understanding that this is a suffix with almost every bracha. You don't make the bracha. You just continue doing what you're doing. So what does that mean? So we have to talk about a couple topics here. The topic of bitachon itself, obviously, is a very long topic. I'm not getting into tremendous depth to that, but we're going to touch on that. First of all, what does it mean, with your whole heart? Rashi tells us that we have to rely on Hashem in all matters, big and small. There's no job too big or too small for Hashem. I have had people ask me, and it's a legitimate question, I understand it. Am I allowed to daven for fill in the blank, whatever the blank might be? The answer is yes. You can daven for absolutely anything. If you're in your house and you're looking for an eraser for a pencil, you can daven that you should find it, because everything is mina shamayim. Everything doesn't mean you lost it necessarily, because whatever reasons that are that you're looking for that pencil, which is a ridiculous example, or an eraser. But you can daven Hashem for everything, big or small. We already know this from Chana in the beginning of Sefer Shmuel, where she talks about it, that she davened. She specifically says, I davened for this child, which meant that she gave a laundry list of requirements to God when she was to become pregnant, and said, this is what I want exactly. So you can, to the minutia of what you want, and also obviously for the big things. We tend to think like, oh, someone needs a refuah. I'm going to daven to Hashem. I want to make sure I don't have any, I have parnasah, I have income. I daven to Hashem. Of course you have to. But a person's afraid to fly, and they can daven. There shouldn't be any turbulence. There's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. That's trusting the Choli Becha. That's shlach Hashem Yahavacha. You're throwing it onto Hashem. What's the word? The expression I've seen it many times. Don't tell God how big your problems are. Tell your problems how big God is. And it's true. We tend to lose sight of that sometimes. We only think we should dive into God for the big things. Not true. The Choli Becha is your whole heart. Rabbi Nachman from Breslov said that a person who has faith, has emunah, has bitachon, it's not an event like, oh, I have faith in God. It's a posture. It's how we comport ourselves. That this is part of my life. That I trust in Hashem for everything. Trusting in Hashem with half a heart is functionally not trusting Hashem at all. It's like saying she's a little bit pregnant. You're pregnant or you're not pregnant. It's not a little bit pregnant. You be early in the pregnancy or late in the pregnancy, but you're pregnant or you're not pregnant. Vilna Gaon says that one who partially trusts in Hashem and partially relies on his own human strategies ends up with nothing, not security, not clarity. You have to do your hishtadlut. You have to do your part. There's no such thing as just lying around waiting for things to happen. It doesn't work that way. You have to do your part. But on the other hand, you have to understand that what you put into it is because of the gifts Hashem gave you. What you get out of it is because of what Hashem gave to you. What happens around you. All those things come from Hashem. So let's take a look at another. Let me find it here. Okay. First of all, let's take a look at these psukim. We're told in Tilim, following. Again, this is nothing that you don't already know, but let's just clarify. Don't put your trust in the great, it means the nobles, or in mortal man who cannot save you. What about Avraham? I need you to clarify the question. I was just asked, what about Avraham? So why don't you turn your mic on and explain your question? If you can. Let me make it bigger so I can see you. Maybe I can turn it on for you. Let's see. Oh, hold on. Okay, well, you want to clarify or no? Because I don't understand your question. Yep, you're on.
Abraham last week
Yes.
was half relying on Hashem, half not. This
In what?
It was a big mess.
In what? I have a reason. I want you to be specific. What do you mean?
He was not relying on Hashem at first, and then
Where?
the whole thing would go down to Mitzrayim. I think is an example.
Okay, very good. That's why I wanted you to say that. And there are parshanim, there are commentators who take him to task for that. You're right. Right? One of the things of the stories, narratives, I should say, of the Avot and of Moshe Rabbeinu, and we see in the Imahot, we see human flaws. Why? They're not deities, they're not gods. Only Hashem is Hashem. So your point is very well taken. That's correct. Okay, and that's why some of the commentators take him to task. That's correct. What happens? The person, the human being, eventually their breath departs them, they return to the dust. What happens of that day when they die? Nothing comes of their plan, meaning they can't help you anymore. Happy is the one who uses Hashem, Yaakov, God of Yaakov, for his help, whose hope is in the Lord Hashem. Okay, very nice. Tells you a couple of psukim we also need to know. Now, I'm going to, let me see if I want to do it this way. I want to do it for a different screen. Let me unshare this for a second. Let me see if I want to do this one instead. Yeah, okay, good. I want to read a Mishnah. So kind of a longer Mishnah. Hopefully we'll have time to do it. I have to go here to share and go to here. This is the Mishnah at the end of Sotah. I actually said I was going to quote this in the Pirkei Avot class recently, which I didn't get to yet. But if you're in the Pirkei Avot class, you may see this a second time. There's a very, very, very long Mishnah at the end of Sotah with some troubling statements, which we're not going to deal with tonight, but we're going to talk about something else. I should first give you repeat the last part of the pasuk. It says that we should not rely on our knowledge. We shouldn't rely only on it. We should rely on Hashem. What does that mean, though? What does that mean? Beit HaMikdash, when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Boshu Chaverim Uvnei Chorim, that the rabbis and the free people were embarrassed. There were less and less good people. And the people who were like criminals, the people who were not good people, they got more and more got stronger. There was no one there to help. There was no one to turn to. So the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says in a rhetorical question, actually not rhetorical as he answered, upon whom can we rely at that point? Only on Hashem. Rabbi Elazar Gadol Omer, Rabbi Elazar the Great said, B'yom shecharav Beit HaMikdash, the day the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, I'm going to skip this part here and just go down things, and things go bad. On whom can we rely? Now, be'ikvot Mashiach, when it's coming closer to the time of Mashiach, chutzpah yiskei, the idea that people are going to more and more of this going chutzpah in the world. Be'yoker ya'amir, hagefen titein pirya v'yayin be'yoker. The grapes will be out there more, and wine will be more expensive. And the kingdom or kingship or sovereignty will turn into all kinds of problems. There's no one who's going to stop them. Places where people would used to gather together for Torah would become houses for women of ill repute. And the north will be destroyed. But I'm just going to read it because I'm going to get to a point. And people who are God-fearing they'll look at them as being disgusting. And truth is going to be very rare. And kids will embarrass their elders. The elders will stand before the younger. This is right before Mashiach comes, etc., etc., etc. Here's a famous line for this Mishnah: that the face of the generation will be like the face of a dog, which I've heard saying that like a dog always turns around to look if its master is there, that the leaders are just looking to the people behind them, to the citizens, and they're not really leading. The son will not be embarrassed in front of his father. And upon whom can we rely? Only in our Father in heaven. What's all this about? What's this Mishnah? Let's spend just a minute on it. The Mishnah has a whole list. And again, if you have a time, just go on to look in the last Mishnah in Sotah, and you'll see this whole list and a little bit more translation and in depth. But it's telling us no matter what, whether it's the time of the Beit HaMikdash, whether it was the time of pre-Mashiach, whatever it's going on, understand that we have no one to rely on except Hashem. Does that mean we shouldn't be doing our part? Of course not. That's what I said. It's the first half. We have to do our part. We have to do our hishtadlut. But ultimately, we have to rely on Hashem bringing us to the Mashiach. Ultimately, we have to do our part. We all have to bring Mashiach. We all have to do the mitzvot. We have to be the Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, Ben Adam L'Makom, everything. Ultimately, what's going to be the driving force? Hashem. When we understand that, then we'll understand what it means to rely on Hashem, to lean on Hashem. To lean on Hashem means I have problems. It means I have questions. It means I have tsarot. I have good things, whatever it might be. Give it over to Hashem. Hashem can help you. One last comment. I had a chiddush, my own thought. How do you know if you're really doing it? So there's a halacha that says that when a person gets called up to the Torah, that they're not allowed to lean, on the table, on the shulchan. They have to be standing. They also can't lean on something else. They have to be standing unless they're, God forbid, unable to stand. They have to stand properly. The halacha decides what does it mean to be standing and not leaning on something. So it says if you were to remove the object, they would still be standing, then they weren't leaning. If you remove the object and they would fall, then they were relying or leaning on that object. So I say that if a person would say, if you could say to a person, listen, if you could take God out of the equation completely, what would that affect your life? If someone says, oh my gosh, I would collapse. What do you mean God's not in my life? A collapse? Then you are relying on Hashem. You are leaning on Hashem. If someone says, well, I got along without him before, I get along without him now, that's a problem because then you're not relying on Hashem. Our goal, as we saw tonight, is to try our best to keep the Torah mitzvot, to try to remember, proactively remember Torah, to make ourselves, put ourselves in situations where we'll do a mitzvah or do something by putting it into a routine that we may not normally do. It's also to make sure that it will cause us to have some more days that are fulfilled. It will also help us to understand that we have to focus both on chesed and emet. And by doing that, and by making sure our inside and our outside are in sync, that we're good inside and outside, that we also, ultimately, the bottom line is, to just rely on Hashem. Let me stop the video for 1 second.